It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Had an interesting afternoon thinking about my grandfather. My grandfather, who dropped out of school after the 8th grade, went to work shoveling coal off the back of a coal truck for 17 cents an hour. Back during the in the middle of the Depression, to be able to put, food on the table, a roof over the head, steal some coal to keep the house warm. Told stories about how difficult life was. Never complained. Was a guy who worked his entire life, worked himself, into the grave, to be honest. And I thought about him today because I saw this story from Indiana. And again, it's just this weird moment. My grandfather, his family came from Indiana. They were thrown off a reservation in Indiana and ended up in Ohio, where he was born, and lived in poverty as a kid. And, long story, really, really short, because of his hard work, because of the labor movement, because of unions, was able to lead a solid middle-class existence that I fear in this day and age, not possible. It's literally impossible to recreate his life, I believe. A man who had an 8th grade education, worked every day of his life, worked very hard. But I don't know that it's replicable in today's world. But hey, we've got some conservatives, some Republicans who think, hey, Indiana, maybe we can go back 100 years. Maybe we can go back to the good old days when Rick's grandfather dropped out of high school, because State Representative Joanne King, who represents Indiana's 49th state representative seat there, Republican, of course, evidently has introduced a piece of legislation that would allow 14-year-old children to drop out of school and become farm laborers. Yeah, go work on that industrial farm. Don't worry about school. You can do it during the day. While other kids are in school getting an education, you can be out there working on the farm. Now, here's the thing. The story is that, as I understand, it's already happening. This is just making it legal, because they're already breaking the law. Indiana's already got a problem with child labor, as we have across this country, because the enforcement really, really not there. And as we've been seeing nationally, child labor law violations have been surging, and I think it's more that we've been catching it, more that the administration's been looking for it, but also I think, hey, we need cheap labor. Corporate America, their drug of choice, cheap labor. But child labor violations were up 50% in 2023. And you look at the Republican states that are loosening child labor restrictions. It's quite amazing. And look, I've heard all of the arguments, and I'm not buying them. And the weird thing for me is, I was thinking about my grandfather, and I was thinking about, the fact that he worked hard, as parents do. And I do this with my kids. I want them to be better than I am. I want them to have an easier life. I don't want them to have to work as hard. I want them to get a better education, have better opportunities. We as parents, that's a given. And he did as well. And to him, education was an important thing. To now see us going backward, I think would hurt him. And that generation as a whole, to be honest. I was just thinking about it. Over the holiday, we were in Costa Rica. And one of the guy who would give us a tour in Costa Rica, the one thing that I took from the entire day we spent with him was the fact that here was a guy who was so incredibly proud of the fact that they have free education. They have free education for as far as you can go. And to him, this was the greatest thing. They were taking kids out of the fields, taking kids out of the banana fields, taking kids out of work, and making sure that they were getting an education. And as my mind was going, I was thinking, this is the sign of a developing country. A developing country going, hey, we want to get better. We want long-term investments instead of short-term gains. Because one of the arguments for allowing a developing country to have cheap labor, child labor, is that it stifles economic growth. Prevents families from, being able to get that little set of hands in there to do some extra labor and bring some money into the household, maybe getting them out of poverty. By allowing those kids to go into the workforce, never mind that education. They can get that later. You're going to bring some income in. It's going to contribute to the overall economic health of the family and the development of the country, because more GDP, it's good for the country. Except now when those kids grow up, they're not going to have the skills that they would have had they an education. The other argument they make is in places, in developing places, it's their culture. Children are expected to work. It's the culture. They're on the verge of starving. It's the culture. It's the culture to expect young children to provide their own food. And how dare we impose our Western style child labor laws on their practices and traditions. And the weird thing is now we're going backwards. And I look at all of these Republican states that have gone after and loosened restrictions. It's quite remarkable. This Indiana thing is just the latest. I mean, Iowa's part of it, Florida, Arkansas. You go down the list of Republican-led states that have attacked child labor, and you just go, where are we going? Oh, yeah, we need cheap labor. And they always use the same arguments. Well, we're providing valuable work experience, teaching kids important skills. Like being responsible and time management and the value of hard work, what it means to earn a dollar. And it's going to help those families. It's going to help them, make ends meet. Instead of going, hey, maybe we could teach those kids about responsibility and about ethics and about other in a different way, instead of putting them in dangerous jobs and working long hour nights where they should be doing their homework. Maybe we shouldn't have them out there competing with mom and dad for jobs that end up lowering wages. Maybe we should take them out of the workforce, raise wages a little bit so mom and dad can afford to keep a roof over that. I don't know. Maybe just a thought. Understand, protecting our children should be the top priority in all of this. And any perceived or potential benefits that they throw out pale in comparison to the risks that are posed by putting kids into dangerous jobs. But here's the thing, and this is the part that really infuriates me. These aren't going to be just any kids. These are going to be poor kids. And we know how much Republicans hate poor people, especially poor children. We see the policies that they attempt to move by taking food out of the mouths of children. So is it surprising to us, in any way, shape, or form? Is it surprising to us that we would exploit them by putting them into dangerous jobs, working long hours? No, not at all. Would it surprise us that they would want them to be like my grandparents' generation? 8th grade education's good enough. Is this the future? Now, again, I use my example of the gentleman I met in Costa Rica. There's a country that's developing, that's getting better, that's looking for the future, looking for better opportunities down the road. Does this mean that we're in decline? Does that mean that we're going in the opposite direction? That we need to use what resource we have now instead of investing in the future and ensuring that those children have an opportunity? The weird thing is when I spoke with Eddie in Costa Rica, he was talking about the Nicaraguans coming in to do the work in the fields. They were bringing immigrants in, and they were educating the immigrants' children. And how proud he was of the fact that they were educating a generation of these children. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Now, look, I'm not against work, not against kids working, doing respectable. Look, I cut grass as a kid. I shoveled snow. I worked, all kinds of jobs. But when you're talking about, opening it up to the Wild West, putting kids into dangerous jobs, I have a problem with that. When you're talking about putting it in a situation where parents then have to decide between, hey, because they're arguing it's a parental rights issue. Well, when you're talking about desperate parents, you've got problems here. So I have a huge problem with the direction we're going as a country. And the fact that we don't have the oversight on the federal level over these states that we should to protect these kids. I fear what 2024 brings us. If child labor violations were up 50% in 2023, what's the new year going to bring us? I am not hopeful. But I want to hear your thoughts. Is this a good idea, bad idea? Are you in favor of loosening restrictions so kids can work the overnight shift at the local mall or the local fast food joint or the local kill floor of the slaughterhouse? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I want to hear what you think. Back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we see states across the country continuing to move, well, I should say red states, as we see a lot of Republican states moving to loosen child labor laws, because, hey, we can't get an immigration bill passed. We can't fix our immigration system, and we need cheap labor, so why not go get those poor kids? Put those poor kids get them to work, because the view is they're not getting an education anyway. Put them into the fields, get them into the meat packing plants, get them out there chopping wood. It'll do them some good. But the question is can we keep them safe? Can we ensure that if you're going to put these 14-year-olds on an industrial farm like they want to do in Indiana, can we keep these kids safe? That's a question that I have for my next guest, who was the former acting assistant secretary and deputy assistant secretary of labor for OSHA during the Obama administration. The guy I think is the perfect person to answer this question. Also does an incredible newsletter on workplace safety and labor issues, Confined Space. You can find that at jordanbarab.com/confined space. Jordan Barab, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be here, Rick. Thanks for inviting me.
So let me ask you, we're seeing this movement across a lot of red states to loosen restrictions, to lengthen hours, to do all kinds of stuff to get kids. We've got to get them in the workforce. Is there a way that we can keep them safe, given the fact that we can barely keep adult workers safe in the workplace?
Yeah, well, the answer to that, as you indicate, is pretty much no. As you say, we have a hard enough time keeping adult workers safe. Keeping safe in the workplace is a function of a couple of things. I mean, one is OSHA's effectiveness, and we know that OSHA is a very small agency, very underfunded, and can rarely get to any given workplace, especially late at night when most of these kids are working. But the second thing is that workplace safety is also a function of worker power. In other words, how safe do workers feel in the workplace, standing up to their right to a safe workplace? How knowledgeable are they about the hazards? And that's very difficult for even adult workers, especially if they're not in unions. But for kids, they're pretty defenseless. Those are about, young kids, especially young kids. Some of these young kids actually, really need the money. They're in kind of desperate straits. These are about the most vulnerable, workers, quote unquote, you can find out there, and are very unlikely to even understand what's dangerous, much less to be able to stand up to employers at the risk of losing their jobs, or in some cases even getting deported, if they try to stand up for their health and safety rights and make sure their workplace is safe.
That is an excellent point, because most adult workers, one, don't know what their rights are, and two, don't speak up for themselves. So how do you expect a 14-year-old child to be able to stick up for themselves and not do something? Because I would think that they would believe that the adult in charge of them, their boss, would have their interests somewhat at heart, and we know that's not true.
Yeah. I mean, go up on the roof. It's perfectly safe. Just be careful up there.
Just don't fall.
Don't fall. Yeah, and be careful and make clean out this dangerous machinery. And don't worry about the fact that we actually haven't disconnected it, and if it starts up, you're in trouble, but just trust us. And we all know, for especially employers who stoop low enough to hire kids are not particularly interested in ensuring their safety. They're more interested in making an easy buck by cutting corners on safety and health.
But this is, again, I come back to this moment of where are we as a country when this is what we're doing? I mean, we were just in Costa Rica a couple of weeks ago for the holiday, and the guy who gave us a tour was so proud of the fact that their kids got free education as far as their ability could take them, that their kids weren't working in the banana fields or weren't doing the kind of hard labor that they were doing just several years ago. He was proud of the fact that they were taking children out of work, and here we are, the most powerful country in the world, the wealthiest country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest moment, and yet we're putting our kids back into these situations. What kind of an upside down world are we in?
Yeah, I mean, and there's two sides to that. One is, our government institutions that are designated, have the authority to prevent this, are terribly underfunded. In fact, the Republicans are trying to significantly cut the budget of the Wage and Hour Division, which is already a very small, department at the office in the Department of Labor that's supposed to enforce this. So you've got that going on. At the same time, unbelievably, instead of the states all getting in there and trying to see if they can rein in child labor that's existing there, there a bunch of states, there are at least 16 states that are actually trying to make it easier for kids to work, and easier for employer to hire kids to work longer hours and more dangerous jobs. So you've got a bunch of states, and as you indicated, the red states, heading in exactly the wrong direction. And this is like the 21st century. So what are we doing in the 21st century, talking about a growing problem of child labor?
It's crazy. Now, look, I'm not against kids working. I'm not against my kids working. There are jobs that they should do to learn what it means to earn a dollar and what it means to show up on time and do all those things, those working class ethic things that people need. But that's above and beyond what they need to be doing in their schooling and their development. That's not working in a factory. That's not working in industrial farming. That's not working in meat packing plants. That's not working in jobs where their life could be severely altered because of who knows what reason. This seems to me the wrong direction as a country, and I don't know how to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, we saw at least 4 kids, like 18 and under, some of them 16, getting killed in workplaces just last summer. We really don't know how many kids are getting injured in the workplace, because there's nobody really keeping track of that if the employer chooses to hide it. But just getting hurt or killed in the workplace isn't the only thing. Obviously, those are the worst things. But the fact that kids are now being allowed to work more and more hours, and they're going to school exhausted, if they even go to school at all, or maybe they're maybe dropping out. That has a major impact also on their development at a very important stage in their life.
What do you say to the person, Jordan, who goes, well, you know what? Hey, they're already doing it. The kids are already dropping out of school. The kids are already working under the table. This, by opening this up, we're just going to bring them out of the shadows. We're going to be able to regulate it, Jordan. We're going to be able to see what's going on. We're going to be able to track it better.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, again, some of the states are going the other direction. I mean, even if just tracking it was the answer, even if we had the resources to really track, and oversee that. Some states are going in the opposite direction. I mean, Arkansas, for example, passed a law saying the kids don't even have to register. You used to have to register if you were a kid. And what that does is it makes it impossible when the federal wage and hour division goes in and tries to investigate these cases, it's impossible to find these kids because nobody's registered anymore. It's just kind of a, crazy laissez-faire, do whatever you want to do kind of situation. Yeah. Again, kind of hearkening back more to the 19th century than to the 21st century.
And we know whose kids we're talking about. We're not talking about my kids or your kids.
Yeah.
We're talking about, poverty-ridden kids. We're talking about people of color. We're talking about immigrants. We're talking about poor people.
Exactly. And a lot of these, and again, as you indicate, there are a lot of immigrant kids that have come over here and need the money to live, and they need the money. They're trying to get money to send back to their to their families wherever they came from. And so these are kids, and again, these are particularly vulnerable kids in very dangerous and vulnerable situations. And again, just you couldn't find a more exploitable group of people than immigrant kids who are trying to make a buck.
So just so I'm clear on this, is there any way that you see that there's any positive in this? Because I'm thinking about it. I'm going, okay, your Indiana wants, like I said earlier, Indiana wants to let 14-year-olds work in industrial farms, and there are some who argue they're already doing it. Is there any way that by opening this up, and we can regulate, monitor, pay attention, maybe on the federal? Is there anything on the federal level we can do in these states that are doing this?
Well, I mean, there are federal laws. I mean, some of the states are passing laws that actually, would violate the federal laws, and they're just kind of challenging the feds to enforce it, or maybe hoping it'll be taken to court, and the federal government will lose in court, given the number of courts around the country that are now controlled by Trump appointees. So there's that hope that they can, and it's not just random politicians. These, what we're finding now is that these states that are passing laws to loosen up child labor controls are they're behind all of that are these right-wing think tanks also that are really pushing this in the states. So again, it's not just kind of random legislators. It's actually a concerted effort from conservative business interests to expand the use of child labor. And the only way you're going to fight this is A, to pass better laws, B, to have much higher penalties. Right now, the penalty is only like $16,000 a kid or something like that. Ridiculous. There's been legislation to significantly increase that. No Republicans tend to sign on to that. And third thing is we have an office in the Department of Labor whose job it is to enforce this, but it's incredibly small. They have very few inspectors, and again, the Republicans in Congress are trying to significantly cut that department's budget. So again, the Republicans are not only taking us in the exact wrong direction in the states, they're taking us in the exact wrong direction in Congress as well.
Surprise, surprise. And who's going to suffer? It's going to be our children. Sad stuff here. But Jordan, I appreciate you taking some time sharing your thoughts. I hope folks will check out the newsletter and the work that you do over at jordanbarup.com/confined spaces. A must read for working people to keep up to date what's going on in the workplace. Jordan, I appreciate the time.
All right. You're welcome, Rick. And thanks for inviting me again.
Thanks so much. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It's interesting. It's interesting that Jordan brought up the right-wing think tanks. the moneyed interest behind all of this stuff. Understand, if there wasn't money to be made in this, the kids, look, they don't matter. The policy stuff that doesn't matter for the people that it's happening to. They don't care about your children. They don't care about your community. They care about the dollars and cents. They care about the moneyed interests. And these are the people pushing this stuff. These think tanks, these well-funded, billionaire-funded think tanks, this network of bad idea think tanks, these places where they pay huge salaries to people to dream up bad ideas to impose on the rest of us so that they can make more money. Yeah, these are the people pushing this. The very same people who are pushing the destruction of public education. This is also part of this. Making it enticing. Telling a kid, a 14-year-old, you don't have to go to school. Don't worry about it. You don't have to go to school. You can drop out. You can get a job you'll work down at the farm. That'll be fun, won't it? You can make your own money. You can tell those parents, go pound sand. You want to talk about destroying the family? You want to talk about destroying the fabric of this country? You want to talk about destroying... They've figured out a way to destroy public education because, understand, they want to keep a desperation class of people so that they can exploit and abuse and use whenever they want, and to have around to scare the you-know-what out of the middle segment of the working class. That's what this is about. And look, they do a masterful job. What other reason could you possibly come up with? To say, no, go ahead, drop out of school, go work in the farm during the day. Now, we know that the homeschool crowd, which again, as I say all the time, homeschooling is child abuse, should be outlawed, should be eliminated, should not be allowed. Look, most of the people who I know who homeschool, they barely got out of high school themselves. I want them teaching the next generation of kids? No. No. But here again, this is another way to get around, those labor restrictions. Well, we're homeschooling. We're teaching our children the value of work. Crazy, crazy stuff. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. For our folks watching on Free Speech TV, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time. For our radio audience, we're going to take a quick break. Back with more after this. Make sure you check out the website, thericksmithshow.com, for more on all of our programming. So our quote of the day comes from former Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney. And look, I give Liz Cheney credit for doing what she did as a representative, for standing up against Trump and against all of the insurrectionists, and standing up for what happened and calling out what happened on January 6th. I give her credit for that. Credit where it is due. Same thing with Adam Kinzinger and others who had the courage to step forward and speak out. But I gotta be honest. This quote has me thinking. She was on The View, and she says that I think that the Republican Party itself is clearly so caught up in the cult of personality that it's very hard to imagine that the party can survive. She said, I think it's increasingly clear that once we get through 2024, we're going to have something else, something new. She said, I believe the country has to have a party that's based on conservative principles and values, where we can engage with the Democrats on substance and on policy. And I think post-2024 election, we're going to see a huge tectonic shift in our politics. I don't know. Because here's the thing. Donald Trump is not, I don't believe, the entire cause of where we are. He's the face of it. He's an awful lot of the problem. But I argue conservatism is the cancer. And I've always argued this. Extremism is the cancer in all of this, on both sides. And I'm not doing the both sidesism thing. Extremism is always the problem. But conservatism has brought us, especially in the economic world. And I had this interesting conversation with someone today that, every time I see this person, they always want to blame. It's always the Democrats' fault. No matter what, everything has to be. The Democrats did this. Democrats did this. No matter what. And I said, no, it's a lot more complicated than just Joe Biden's in office, so everything's his fault, or hey, when George Bush was in office, the Democrats controlled Congress, so it's all their fault. It's more complicated than that. And I made the comment that I said, both times that I've been laid off, that I've lost my job or been laid off from work, there's been a Bush in the White House, and it's true. Back in the 90s, when the recession was going on back then during the Bush years, I was laid off for a good period of time. And when H.W. Bush, that was with H.W. Bush, and when W became president, right then there was another recession that hit, and boom, I was laid off for several weeks at that point. And I said, that's now, do I blame them for doing it? No, I don't. A lot of things happened that it just was what it was. And this person's like, no, it's Democrats. And we get into this red hat, blue hat thing. And I said, that's not the argument. And that's not where you should be looking at. It's the policies. So when I hear Liz Cheney say, we got to get back to conservative principles, and I go, no, that's what got us into this mess. The reason we have a working class in this country that is so angry, the reason you have the Trump base, and I believe this fully, and I know I'm going to get a bunch of emails from people going, no, they're all racist and they're all homophobic, and look, some of them are, and I'm not gonna disagree with that. Some, not all, some. Most of them are folks who they grew up believing that their life was going to be, that their birthright was work hard, play by the rules, and get ahead. That if they did the 40 years, there was going to be a gold watch at the end, a defined benefit pension, and a golden retirement. That they were going to be okay. And it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Life's been tough. They've gotten screwed over and over and over again. Corporate America has run them through the ringer. The wealth class of this country has run them through the ringer. Our political system, lobbied heavily by the moneyed interests, has run them through the ringer, and they're angry about it. And rightfully so, as working people should be. So when she says that, we have to have conservative principles and values, I'm like, most of the last 50 years, the destruction of the working class and the desperation and the problems that have been created have been because of conservative principles and values. The fact that we've destroyed unions, the fact that we've had limited government. Because you go, well, what is conservative, Rick? What is conservatism in America? And what we're told, and if you ask a conservative, someone who identifies as a conservative, they're going to say, they believe in limited government. They want states' rights, local control, until they don't. Now, again, this is what they say, not what they do, and that's a lot of this stuff. There's individual freedom, and they talk about responsibility a lot in their ideology, not in their actions. And this is, again, my problem with a lot of this stuff. It's a lot of words. It's not a lot of actions. They believe in capitalism, free market capitalism. Let the market decide. Except we keep bailing out corporations who make bad decisions. They're against regulation, so we're going to deregulate. And what happens? That crushes the little guy. And I keep coming back to these moments where you go, now again, they tell us they believe in limited government, low taxes for rich people. They believe in fiscal responsibility, and I've yet to see that. I guess I have seen it. When children are hungry, yeah, we make them pull themselves up by the bootstraps. When corporate America needs a bailout, check can't be big enough. And this is my problem with all of this stuff. And it's been learned behavior over decades. We've created an environment where it's socialism for the rich and it's cutthroat capitalism for the poor, and especially the working poor. So do I want those conservative principles that have gotten us into the mess that we're in now? That has told us, you're an individual, you're on your own. The one with the most toys when they die wins. Do I want to return to that kind of a scenario? Or do I want to go back to where my grandparents' generation understood when they came back from World War II and fought fascism overseas and came back home and built the most prosperous working class in the history of humanity? And how did they do it? They did it through community. They did it through government. They did it through looking at their neighbor, even if they didn't like their neighbor, and going, hey, let's build something. Let's unionize the workplace. Let's make sure our government invests in roads and bridges and education and healthcare and stuff that we need. And what we have now, and this is the amazing part of all this, we've got people who are saying, no, we can't use government to do any of those things. We've got to restrain government. You actually had a guy who said, no, I want government so small we can drown it in the bathtub. And you got Liz Cheney, again, going back to, we want to go back to these conservative principles. Now, back to my friend. I said, look, because he brought, I got laid off when Obama became president. And I said, yeah, well, why did that happen? Well, he became president. No, you didn't get laid off because he became president. You got laid off because the economy collapsed under George W. Bush. And the reason the economy collapsed under George W. Bush was because during the Clinton years, you had Gingrich and Phil Gramm and a whole bunch of other, corporatists who pushed through Gramm-Leach-Bliley and undid Glass-Steagall. And Clinton signed it because, hey, we're bipartisan now, and took the dividing wall between boring banking and gambling banking. We just threw it all together. And surprise, 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 what happened? The greed monsters on Wall Street, it only took them 8 years to do, man. Only took them 8 years to bring the country to its knees. And what did we do? We bailed them out. We didn't bail out the guy my buddy who got unemployed. No. We didn't bail out the homeowners who lost their homes. No. We didn't do any of that. We didn't throw a bunch of people in jail who came up with these schemes. No, we didn't do any of that stuff. We were going to go after the people who signed the faulty mortgages or whatever it was that they were doing. They had no idea what they were doing. They were just dupes who were paid $15 an hour just to scribble on a paper. They didn't even know why. That's who we were going to go after. And this is what we do in this country. So when I hear we're going to go after and we're going to conservative principles, I'm going, please, no, I can't take much more. What we need a revival of community. And I say all the time, if we want to reunite this country, we want to revive it, we need to reunionize it. And not just in the workplace, in society as a whole. We need to re-engage each other and accept each other. This is the other part of this. I might not like you, but I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to fight for your rights. We used to be that country. We're not so much. And in my interview the other day with Joe Walsh, I brought up, I said, look, I used to have a lot of conservative friends that I used to, joust with. We used to have, political arguments all the time. And I love doing that because, one, it's fun. Two, sharpens your skills, makes you think, maybe a little bit differently. And makes your argument stronger because you have to actually defend it. You can't just spew. You actually have to understand why you think the way you do. So I like that. The problem is most of those people left. They don't want to do that anymore because we want to live in our silos. We want the confirmation bias. I believe I'm right because it's tested. I believe I'm right because I understand that good, sound policy, smart investment helps people. And when you help people, there's an opportunity for lives to get better. And I look at my own. Our government invested a lot of money in me. First when I was born. Then food stamps to put food on our table, and housing assistance to keep a roof over our head when my mother lost her job. A death benefit when my mother passed away, so that my grandparents could take care of me. When I was 11, I almost died, because I had an asthma attack. We didn't have health insurance. Government paid for that. And for that, I pay a lot of taxes. That's how the system is supposed to work. Now, the problem is, if I were conservative, I would say, no, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. I alone did it. No help from anybody else, didn't know. And I don't want to pay any taxes. I don't want to fund anyone else. I'm gonna not just kick the ladder off the side of the building. I'm going to put the ladder through a chipper. There will be no ladder left. That's conservatism in my view. Now, look, I've had friends who are saying, no, Rick, you don't understand. It's about personal responsibility. It's about, doing for yourself. And I go, yeah, well, if you believed that, you would have been in favor of the Affordable Care Act, because there was a personal responsibility component to that Donald Trump did away with. You remember the individual mandate that everyone was losing their freaking minds over? That was actually understand, the Affordable Care Act was in part, well, mostly the Heritage Foundation's plan to Hillary and the Hillary Care of the 90s. That was a conservative plan, sort of. Only it was meant to be more universal. But we can't talk like that, because that helps people. So when I listen to Liz Cheney, I'm concerned about what the future is. Look, right now we have to save democracy. So if the Liz Cheneys of the world and even the Joe Walshes of the world are on board to keep Donald Trump out of the White House, I'm all in favor. But I got to tell you, I am concerned about what they view their future as. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. A very unusual army marched on Washington, D.C. Pro-labor Catholic priest Father James Renshaw Cox led the march. Father Cox had worked as a cab driver and steel worker before attending seminary and serving as a chaplain in World War I. After the war, as a pastor in Pittsburgh, he organized food assistance for those hit hard by the Great Depression. As the number of unemployed grew, Father Cox came up with a new plan to help the suffering in his city. He organized Cox's Army, 25,000 Pennsylvanians who had lost their job due to the Great Depression. Cox led them from Pennsylvania to the nation's capital to demand a works program. Cox led them from Pennsylvania to the nation's capital to demand a public works program to put people back to work. The protest was the largest in Washington, D.C. up until that time. It was considered a great embarrassment to Republican President Herbert Hoover, yet the president still did not move to provide government assistance. Such inaction helped to usher in the era of Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt's presidency, whose New Deal policies included public jobs programs. The protest also spawned a popular saying for women of that day. According to the Associated Press, the men of Cox's Army ate 2,500 pounds of sauerkraut, 1,500 pounds of hot dogs, 11,000 apples, 650 gallons of soup, 450 loaves of bread, and 1,600 dozen of donuts and rolls during the protest. When cooking dinner for their families, women might explain, "I made just enough food to feed Cox's Army." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Like us on Facebook and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news. A new federal program that will provide kids with groceries over the summer. Families are going to get $40 per child in additional funding to be able to put food on the table. It's going to help some 21 million children across 35 states. And again, this is one of those things I remember from when I was a kid. When I was a kid growing up in the projects on the west side of Cleveland, back in the 70s, you would go to the local elementary school. Purtis Elementary is where we went. But across the country, this is what happened during the summer, and they would have a hot lunch. And, it wasn't much, a little tin of beans and wieners or grilled cheese sandwich or something. But for many of the kids that were there, it was the only hot lunch, the only hot meal they got that day. So it was vital for the community. And what we know is a lot of kids, today, they get fed at school, they get breakfast, they get lunch at school, and that is fabulous. But when summertime comes around, there's nothing. So the administration is moving to ensure that the kids in these 35 states have access, and families have access to a little bit of extra revenue to be able to put some food on the table. And not surprising, the states not taking the money are going to be your red states. Your Alabamas, your Floridas, your Georgias, your Mississippis, your South Carolinas, your South Dakotas, of course, your the states that are going to, and we don't care so much about the children. But here's the thing, and this is the part that get me. And this is the part that's really frustrating to me. These programs are to help those kids in different states. And yet this has become a political issue. Feeding children has somehow become a political issue, which is bizarre and angering and frustrating and a whole bunch of stuff. But again, to me, it shows the difference between the red hats, the blue hats, between conservatives and liberals, however you want to put, and the people who are running this stuff. I don't know why you would choose, and again, it's small government. I don't know why you would choose not to accept funding that would go to help children, hungry children. But then again, look, we saw Republicans, every Republican, and Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin vote against extending the child tax credit. And then when that happened, child poverty doubled, more than doubled. So are we surprised? The answer is no. And what's angering to me, and I keep coming back to this. Good policy, smart investment makes lives better. Makes the future better, not just for the people getting those services, but for all of us. Had you not made those investments in me years ago, I wouldn't have been I wouldn't be the productive citizens that I am today. Wouldn't be paying the taxes that I am today. So do we as a society want a future of people who are making our country better, making our citizens, our society better, making our cities better, our towns better? Or do we want a society of people who are a drain on it? That's the frustration that I have in all of this. Let's quick go to a couple of emails before we wrap things up. Don sends me an email, says, Rick, I've enjoyed the show on Free Speech TV for years, and I'm really glad that you are now daily. I would, however, disagree with you on beating the former guy only at the polls. The reason for this is that in many states, voters are being kicked off the rolls for no legal reason. Also, even in states that aren't removing voters, they are making it very difficult for people to vote. If voting was fair and easy in all 50 states, then I would agree with you. But since it's not, I can't. You offer a different view and many stories I would never be able to see. So keep up the great work. I appreciate that, Don. Thank you so much. Now, look, I'm right there with you. I completely agree with you that Look, there are states like Georgia that are purging people, like Florida that are throwing people off the rolls. There are states red states across this country that are putting obstacles in the way of people voting. I fully understand that. My problem is that of a strategist. I don't believe that the Supreme Court is going to ultimately allow him to be held off the ballot. I don't get it. Now, in talking with Joe Walsh, he did bring up a good point. He said, look, it's our system. We have to go through our system. Our system will work itself out. We should be all in favor of that. And that makes it's a good point. It is our system. Our system we should be happy that it's happening. We should be okay with it. As a strategist, though, continually giving Trump the victim card and believing that the outcome is not going to go the way we hope it does by keeping him off the ballot is where my mind generally is. By making him a martyr, that's where my concern is. And I don't think that you can put Trumpism down without him being soundly beaten at the polls. And that means we've got to do the hard work of getting Joe Biden elected. We've got to do the hard work of going out and saying, no, we're not going to have Donald Trump in the White House. Just not going to happen. And for me, that's the way forward. So I agree with you. We've got to do much more in states that are pulling the shenanigans, which is why Democrats need to take the House and the Senate and keep the White House, and we need to pass another voting rights bill to ensure that everyone across this country has access to that ballot box. Because this whole wonderful experiment of self-governance does not work without that ballot box being accessible to everyone. Also, Tanya writes, Rick, love you, never miss a show. My father worked in the steel mills in Chicago in the 1960s and 70s, and we had an amazing life. Those jobs afforded us the American dream that you saw on TV. It's so sad to see everything that generation built being sold off to the highest bidder. How do we change things back to the way they were when I was a kid? When work was rewarded and people respected each other. Well, I got to tell you, Tanya, that's a tall order. I don't think we ever go back. I want us to go forward to a place where work is rewarded, and I think we can. And I think Joe Biden is moving us in that direction, slower than I would hope, but change is slow and sometimes painful. I do hope that we continue down the path that we're currently moving towards. Reshoring some manufacturing, giving workers the right to collectively bargain, having government encourage people to unionize, so that we can redistribute wealth back to the way it was when your father was working. When those CEOs were making 20 times that of the average worker instead of 300 or 400 times. When it was the wealthy and the corporations who were paying taxes instead of the fast food worker and the bus driver. That one income could support a family instead of putting kids back into the workforce so that we could keep a roof over our head. There are so many things that we could, should, and must be doing. But it comes back down to politics. And this, goes back to what my high school government teacher always said. Politics is about who gets what. Government is about who gets what. And politics is how we decide it. So we have to engage. We have to get out and get people elected. We have to get out and, do the hard work. Talking to friends, talking to neighbors, getting people out to vote, and voting ourselves. And when that obstacle is in the way, when the barrier is in front of us, we got to get over it. We got to get around it. We got to go under it. We got to go through it. And this is where community comes in. This is where we have to do this together. Because look, the only way this country moves forward is if all of us are in. The only way we get through this moment in history is if all of us come together. And that means reaching out, like it or not, that means reaching out to some of those folks that we may not like very much. That means reaching out and finding that common ground. I know it's tough, but I also know we can do it. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Eventually been getting slammed here the last couple of days. A lot of people not too thrilled with my interview with Joe Walsh. I wonder why. But by all means, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, you can download the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.